So we're going to talk about why you should publish, and I know you have some base motivation coming in today. We're going to talk about how academic publishing works. As one student said in an interview, like, I want to know how the sausage is made. I was like, maybe prefer peek behind the curtain as like another one you could use. What are the steps, right? And then I was thinking today, it just came to me while I was talking to Jordan on Teams that if any of you want to start like a little writing group, like maybe in clusters, you could do comp sci people. We could meet a few times over the summer with one of the Writing Center tutors, and you could just have that dedicated time in the Writing Center or online to work on your paper in a kind of in a way that you feel supported and kind of structured a little bit in your first experience. So some things to think about, and I've already kind of used up a lot of time, so this just to reflect. I'm not going to get you to answer this out loud, but when you think about publishing your work, does that change how you're going to approach thinking about your research this spring and summer? Probably, yeah, because you're thinking toward the share part of your project, which might be a poster presentation, but there's a wider audience when you publish. It's now not just available to the campus community, but it's available, internationally. And we do at USearch, for example, have a wide reach. So it's slightly different lens, and for potentially a wider audience, a different genre of work. There's a lot of fear mongering around publication. A lot of, reviewers can be really mean, and that's absolutely true. But if as you get to know the researcher you're working with, the grad students, ask them about how many times they've been rejected and like how they learned how to write. And you probably get some really interesting conversations because we've all experienced that. So you don't just see the glossy publications. There's a lot of heartache that can go into it. So, and there's a lot that's really exciting about it. And yeah, so sometimes there's like cultures, and I find in the sciences, we have a hard time at the journal getting students to submit their work because they're maybe harder on themselves, or if there's maybe more of a performance culture in the sciences. So there's a real hesitation to submit their work to the journal. So the humanities majors, they go crazy. They love it. They have no hesitations, very confident, sometimes unjustifiable. Okay, so the research life cycle, this is just one. There's so many different kind of visualizations of this. I just tried to pick a really basic one for now. So we can see that we're talking about the writing up your research and the sharing and publishing of your research. So sharing can look like Twitter. So for example, or X, I don't subscribe to it anymore for obvious reasons involving Elon Musk. But I did follow researchers. There's Brian Brook in agriculture. There was a researcher who researched like car accidents. And there was one where, useful information for the public, this research is usually funded by the public. So dissemination can come through on those kind of platforms. So I learned a lot about invasive wild pigs through Twitter, through the slipperiness of snowsuits affecting injury rates in children in car seats. Like there's just a lot of like good information for the public that can be shared in that way. But then there's, of course, formal publication, which the audience is a little wider than in your classroom or in your lab, but certainly for other academics. So obviously, I mean, you can build your CV or resume, whether you're going into a profession or whether you're going into grad school or a competitive program. There are awards to be won. The undergraduate journal, for example, has two $200 awards for each year for best paper. So transferable skills, I'm not going to crawl my way through these, but I think these are things that have come up on undergraduate research student surveys from the USearch authors over the years. So quite a few students, like a good number of students have remarked, between 85 to 100% of the students agreed that going through the process taught them some of these things. So some of those, it's a very rich, real experience. So some of these will come up in classrooms, but when you test it out there in the real world, there's a certain level of rigor and process that is really educational, that in a very rich way. It's experiential learning, essentially. Student journals can provide a very mentored situation, and I've put in the toolkit a bunch of undergraduate research journals that are worth looking into. The undergraduate research journal here, where it's a very supportive, educative process. So science students, don't be hard on yourselves. What you submit will not be what gets published, right? You're going to have a lot of mentoring along the way before it gets to a polished final draft. We even do a lot of work with you before it goes to review, so you have a better chance of being accepted. Okay, so why seek publication? These are just some quotations we have. You can look at these slides later if you like, just some testimonials from USearch authors. So sometimes, there's that emotional reaction, but once you kind of get over that and can be objective about your work, it really can help you to communicate more clearly. Making your work useful to others. So this, besides like personal motivation, it's very fulfilling, but good for the world to have useful information. So we publish at USearch, for example, more than just research papers. We'll publish lesson plans. We're going to be publishing like a special issue of autoethnographical issue involving hair and how people see their hair. There's just such a wide range of useful information for the general public or for certain professionals to use as well. So getting it out there, I mean, having a young education student with fresh ideas, putting out a lesson plan that can be used by other people in the field, right? So we're accelerating research and knowledge generation. That links to the Journal of Failed Results, which is a biology journal where they just publish bad studies. And it's useful information because it allows research to say, okay, we're not going to do that. So yeah, it's great. Absolutely. Yeah. You're completing the research life cycle. That links to PAWS, where there's the library and OVPR has a research life cycle broken down on all the supports of that stage. You're making your work discoverable. You're joining what's called the scholarly conversation around a very specific topic. It can lead to citations, of course. So just some examples of citations. Now, I'm not going to go through these. These are dozens of citations from various articles that have been published in the journal. We've had citations from student work in Nature, The Lancet, HIV, various books, a few from Routledge, reputable publishers. I checked whether any of these were predatory journals. So yeah, some really impressive citations. So, if you're thinking of aiming big or you're co-publishing with your PI, it's okay to go for it and submit to Nature or whatever it is you want to do. But if you want to go through this educational experience and still have it be work that could potentially be cited, then that is possible. So, okay, academic publishing. So we'll talk about how it works and why, what you need to know about before going in it, like early on, and what's going on behind the scenes, like common mistakes from a journal editor's point of view. We'll talk much more about that in the second, kind of the bookend of this presentation, but I'll talk a bit about it today. So clearly academic publishing exists, especially if we're publishing open access useful to society in the pursuit of knowledge. When you're not publishing open access in reputable open access journals, your work is behind a paywall. And we all know from, like, for example, social media that people will say, do your research. Well, they don't have access to all of the research that you have through the millions of dollars of subscriptions that the university has to academic resources. Medicine, for example, is really difficult to get through to that information. There's one Journal of Polymers and Engineering. It's $60,000 a year, last I checked. So these journals are very expensive, and you will lose access to that information once you leave. There's a presentation coming up on open access, and I really recommend going to it. It will potentially radicalize you. It's wonderful, but it's also very practical. Dee Dee is an amazing librarian and knows a lot about all of this. And it's a responsibility to the public, to funders. This research is funded by the public through grants, for example, quite often. Okay, so this is pretty tiny. Sorry, can you see it okay? Maybe the contrast needs to be improved. So basically, academics, this is like really distilling a whole bunch of steps into one. Create a manuscript, send it to a journal. Journal receives it, the editor reviews it, or the editorial team reviews it to see if it fits the scope of the journal. So when you look ahead to choose a journal early on in the process, like early in the spring and summer, you want to identify a journal to see whether what you're going to do fits the scope of that journal, or adjust what you're going to do to fit the scope of that journal with that goal. So the editor then sends the paper to peers, scholars, independent researchers, because they're not specialists in every subject. Things can get pretty specific. The peer reviewers check for, have they used the right methods? What does it add to what we already know in the field? And is it new or original research? And this is the part where when you're doing this kind of original research with researchers, you have much better kind of quality stuff you're coming out of, as opposed to a student who's maybe working in a classroom and wrote a really good paper and got a good mark and handed in the journal. It doesn't maybe reach the bar of like, it's 90% in the class, but for a wider audience in terms of contributing something to the field, it's maybe not publishable. The editor checks it and sends it to the author with any kind of guidance or rejects it based on the peer reviewer feedback. And there's all kinds of different types of peer review, by the way. And then revisions are made, and if all goes well, then the paper is published. And there's lots of little tiny steps in between in all of these little boxes. It's quite a detailed process. There's lots of mentorship where there's a helper for everything on campus. So people can be helping you along the way. So the processes ensure quality control, obviously, trustworthiness of information. Scholars want their reputation, career advancement, tenure and promotion standards. There's the publish or perish kind of culture, which is problematic, but we won't go there today. And it's for your own learning and development. It can be really gratifying. And then you're building on that knowledge in a way throughout your career. Peer review also gives you really detailed and constructive feedback. It helps you to understand things you might have overlooked, especially as a student. If you're submitting, this is really valuable information to kind of round out your understanding of a topic. And then publication gives something permanent. You've heard of a DOI, or a digital object identifier. It's a permanent link. And in that way, unless there's some kind of apocalypse or AI starts hacking everything and everything is erased, whatever is going to happen, we'll talk to computer scientists here. A little keeps me up at night. But yeah, it should be there permanently. Yeah. All right, it's a bit dark, sorry. Okay, different types of review. Most journals will do the double anonymous peer review. It used to be called double blind, but that's considered ableist language. This is usually what it's referred to as now. So the author and the reviewer don't know who each other is. It's not an airtight, perfect process because there's a lot of bias in peer review, and that's a whole other really interesting topic that we're actually creating some modules on in the library. So it's an interesting topic and something that you can think about when you're submitting or if you become a reviewer in the future. Open review, we've done this a little bit with the journal, with the undergraduate research journal. It provides a little bit more of a collegial, people, when it's not anonymous, they can be a bit more nice and helpful, and it can be more of like a back and forth or conversational kind of feedback approach. So it's really opening up as like a very credible and excellent way to produce your research. You can even upload your work like an early preprint, and you can have other researchers in the field comment, like crowdsource, like how can you make this paper better? So it's great. It's actually a really good form of networking too. Like if you put good stuff up there, people get to know your name a little bit. So open review is an up and coming, or is out there as a really, if it's done well, a really great process that you can use. Okay, so look at the publication agreements in terms of how peer review works. So how do we get started now? So we're in this kind of planning stage. This is not like really a linear process. So a lot of times, you do a bit of this and then you go over here and do a bit of that, and then you come back to the first bit, and then there's some hopping around, but it's sort of like the general trajectory is progress toward completion, right? So where you have those points of frustration and where librarians and where the Writing Center tutors see those like emotional moments from students is where they feel like, I already did that. Oh, now I got to research. I need another article, or that's not going to work. There's a lot of that kind of mini crises as you go along, but just be calm about it because that's a completely normal and healthy part of the process. And that's what what professors are going through as well. So it's just completely normal. So this is a general, this is what we're going to aim for, but there's a lot of, it's called recursive process. Okay. So these are the steps, and I'll have these printed out in the toolkit in a really kind of obvious way. I'm going to try to organize the document so you can just click on it and you can hop down to the different sections. So there'll be a table of contents. So the first step is to really meet with your supervisor. This is their lab. This is their work. You want to be sure that you're being respectful, that there's ethical considerations, that you're not. We had our first retraction in the journal a few years ago, which is a big deal to have an article retracted. And it was really upsetting because it was a student it's their first time publishing, and it was really traumatizing for them. But what had happened was they'd taken a whole bunch of data and written it up, but didn't fully tell the co-authors what was going on, and didn't talk to the PI. And so they actually found the paper and contacted us and said, I did not consent to this. Turned out the author hadn't really read the publication agreement carefully. So we now have built-in processes to double, triple check that this kind of thing is happening, but it's really important and respectful to talk to them. So I'll talk to you about how to do that. Okay, how are we doing for time? I don't have a clock. I have a watch, but the battery's dead. I just learned this morning.
11:20.
11:23. Okay. So we'll just go through all of these. Okay. So first of all, meeting with your supervisor or PI, like you're not going to ask all these questions necessarily, but this is kind of a plan that you can go in with a piece of paper. With Zoom, you can have something that you're typing into, and make sure that you're kind of formal about it, like respect their time, schedule a meeting. Don't just corner them in the hallway. You might like drop a hint or like in conversation or lunch table or something like that. But you really want to have some formality about it. If you have co-authors, then you can all be part of that. Tell them you're interested, but don't just say, I'll find it fulfilling. I want to be a grad student. I want to, make it more about, I want to learn about X. I want to contribute. I like put it outward rather than about your personal goals. Think about the goal of what they're working on. They care passionately about what they're working on. I mean, not always, but ideally. And so you want to show that similar kind of investment, right? So that's just a rhetorical approach that I would really recommend. Ask if you're working on an independent project or a larger lab project. Maybe you know that already. Could you be a co-author? Some journals, the undergraduate journal here, for example, allows you to co-author with profs. And so you can have professor publishing in the undergraduate journal as long as you are the primary author of that article. And we've had articles with 15, 20 authors, and these can get kind of ridiculous, and it's like who's actually doing the work and all that comes into play. But ask if that's possible. Would you need ethics approval? This is really important. So that's another reason I think we struggle with science work, because ethics approval can't be really granted retroactively. So you have to go through that ethics process. Now, it should have been done already with what you're working on with UPI. Like, I hope so. If not, that's a big deal. So some classes, programs have it built in, like in psychology and undergrad classes, it's already all pre-approved. So the work that you do should be publishable, but it's good to verify. And then can you publish parts of it? So sometimes we've had students not get ethics approval, but then they have this great information. Well, how can we disseminate it in a way that's ethical? They can write like a narrative piece, like this is what I experienced as a researcher and this is what we did, without giving any data away or anything like that. So there's talk to our journal, and we can talk about different genres you could explore. What is their position on AI use? So some researchers, particularly in the sciences, and I would say maybe in business as well, we've seen professors be more either like enthusiasts or open or yes, but in the humanities, for very good reason, it's not appropriate, it's problematic. So there's a really mixed opinion. You're going to have maybe book extra time for the meeting because it's a hot topic and it's fun to talk about. So instead of, can I use AI? Think, should I use AI? That's how you frame it with the prof. Don't say, can I use it? Because then you're kind of like suggesting that maybe you're trying to shake a shortcut, perhaps, rather than framing it as, what are the ethics of it? What do you think? Like, should I use it? And, or I don't want to use it. I choose to opt out of AI for whatever moral, ethical reasons. Who will own the data? What's the plan for results? Is there certain data you can't publish? Can they suggest some forums? So they understand the publication landscape in their field. Are there genres outside traditional research papers? We have our next issues coming out of the College of Medicine, but it's autoethnographical work. It's not your typical like empirical sort of work, and it mixes in artwork. So there's different things we can do, and different things other journals can do. Ask for a reading list. This is really helpful, and it's going to help you be more interested in what you do throughout the summer. If you can do some reading and background, you're going to feel yourself finding a little bit of more context for what you're doing, and you're going to be more interested. It's going to be more fun for you. Maybe you've done some already, or maybe your PI wants you to do some already. And then understand like what kind of smaller question can I focus on within that bigger question we're trying to answer together as a team, right? What kind of small thing could I focus on? Is there an angle that you could take? Is there a knowledge gap? And that's really what's going to make your work more publishable. It's an important question. So that's a big conversation. So the research gap and problem statement. So this is speaking to that last item on the list, but talking with the prof. When you're talking to them about this is what this means. So the research gap is basically, we don't know something, we want to find out. That's obvious, right? There's a missing piece in the literature. Maybe it's an ignored population. Maybe it's an unanswered question. Maybe there are conflicting studies out there. Maybe not much has been done and they're looking at writing a review. So it's basically like looking backwards, that's what's missing. Problem statement, you look at consequences, right? You're looking forward. Why the gap matters in the real world. It connects like the meaningfulness to the world or to the organization or whatever it is, or to the specific population that you're looking at, the big picture. So that's kind of where you start. Research gap, you can look at what hasn't been studied. You can look at populations, who's been left out. You can look at theoretical gaps. You can look at contextual, like what hasn't been tested in this particular setting. You can look at contradiction, like studies are disagreeing on something. You can look at methodologies. So Journal of Failed Results perhaps might have some problem statements are more answering the questions of who is affected, what's missing, what can go wrong, where can it go wrong, why do you need to solve the problem? All right, so co-authorship. It's really important you're structured about this, not just, hey, yeah, you want to put your paper together? Oh, that was a great summer. It's not going to work well, okay? It's not going to go well for you. So you want to decide on a lead author. They're taking the responsibility of managing the project, communicating, setting deadlines, and communicating with, keeping in touch with the PI, keeping in touch with talking as well to the publisher. So there's a lot of conversations that happen usually in a publishing platform called OJS. So Open Journal Systems is typically the type of software that's used on the back end. And that's where you want to have all your conversations, and that's going to be the primary author. You want to be clear about, and for that extra work, you get to be the first listed author on the article. So you can duke it out over that, right? You want to be clear about who's doing what. You want to have your process lined up and match to a calendar, deadlines. You want to meet regularly. Have a screen handy. Use the meetings as deadlines, so have action items. Write those action items down. Share them right after meetings. Stay in contact. All of you've done group work before. You know how it can go. You're at that maturity or that in terms of being a student, that level of understanding. Okay, it can go wrong, and here's why. AI. There's a whole section in our writing help guide on how to determine the terms of how you will use AI. It's got to be really specific, because you can't have one author going and you don't know they're using AI. And this can happen in group projects too. There could be some real problems if it disagrees with the publication agreement, or just as in class with the rules in your class around using AI. So you want to be clear about how it's going to be used in the writing process and the research process, all elements, and that guide can give you those questions to ask. You can use the Writing Center as a meeting space. We do group appointments as well. And you can also meet with the librarian for your subject area. They'll be the most helpful person for getting started. Okay, you also want to read and complete the publication agreement together. Have a meeting, go through it together. If it's with USurge, you can meet with us and we can walk you through it together. What's the time? Feels like 11:40.
Nope, 11:32.
Oh, I thought I was pretty good at guessing the time. I guess not. Okay, so setting up a writing calendar. So you can consider different types of software you can use. You want to make sure that you're using software that's not sharing information with, for example, like American servers. They have the Patriot Act in America, and so they can basically access a lot more information than but you're not necessarily protected even with Canadian servers. So you want to use software. The university has pretty good vetting for security. Probably not perfect. Yes, probably hackable, whatever. But you want to make sure that you're in line with what the researchers are using so that you're not sharing sensitive information. I mean, as flawed as it can be, the Microsoft Suite, you have access to a lot of those tools as students. I don't know if you have access to MS Planner, but I think it's pretty cool. I've been playing around with it. might be interesting for the research and writing process. So you can kind of look into, somebody might already have an idea of what works well, and your supervisor might have an idea as well. Okay, you want to use a shared calendar is a good idea with reminders. Okay, choosing a journal. Any questions so far? Take a breath. And take a little sip of some water. Any questions? Anybody want to leave? They're out. This is too much. Yeah. Like, oh, this is, yeah. All right. So the university, this is choosing a journal is really not my thing. It's where librarians can come in. It's where people researching in your area, the professors or scholars can come in. So you want to, I'll be didactic about it, make your work open access. It's going to get cited more, but make sure you choose a non-predatory journal, something that's legitimate. A good place to look is the directory of open access journals. Those journals have been vetted. USurge is in the DOAJ. So I'm not going to go deeply into this because this is librarians' territory and they're paid to do that job and I don't want to steal their labor, right? Okay. So so book a consultation with the subject librarian. If you're using a lot of like visuals or something, you might need to talk to the copyright coordinator. Kate, very friendly, lovely person. Not like militaristic about copyright or anything. Like she won't shame you or anything. Yeah, so this is like super helpful. The Open Scholarship librarian, Dee Dee, she's giving a presentation. She's amazing. Or she'll point you to somebody else who can help. And then the toolkit that I'm going to be giving you will have a list of undergrad journals. So you want to look at the researchers' publications. So what I mean by that is the person you're working with, like look at what they've written. It'd be kind of interesting to see how they write, where they've written, what they've published. It might be even nice to do that before you meet with them, so you have a sense. You might not use that information, but you'll have a bit of a grounding in like that world and what it sounds like, right? In terms of prose, like how it reads, where it's put. There are forums. You want to look at open access. What else? Instructions for authors. Look at the type of peer review. Like if you're looking for a more open peer review, that might be something worth exploring. It can be more educational and softer, but still rigorous. And read the publication agreement. And be really careful you're not dealing with a predatory journal. So there's just a little guideline from SFU. Simon Fraser University has a lot of really good research. It's kind of known for its online information about publishing. So they've got really good infographics and whatnot. So yeah, this is something that's going to be gone over in a library session. So I'm going to skip over this, but reasons why you'd want to publish open access. Okay, USurge is a good option. We have a lot of different genres or categories of submission. So if you don't have time to write a full research paper, we can talk to you about other ways you can communicate what you did, and you'll still be in a peer-reviewed scholarly journal. Okay, so publication agreements. They are legal contracts between the author and the journal publisher. They can be really boring to read. They're legalistic, but don't just skim through that. Make sure you understand what it's saying. Again, maybe your a grad student you're working with can help you to translate it. A librarian can help you to translate it. The undergraduate research journal editors can help you to translate it. And they will say things about copyright, about, for example, Creative Commons licenses. So some journals apply an automatic Creative Commons license that might disagree with the terms of what you're allowed to share. Some might have really tight copyright for sharing. And Creative Commons is a whole other area that's worth thinking about, but I'm not going to go into today. But look up Creative Commons licensing and academic publishing, and it's a whole world. You'll learn about your rights. You'll learn about whether you can, for example, republish that information again, whether you can be up for consideration with other journals at the same time. Usually it's a no. Any AI policy. And if you sometimes they're a little vague because they're just only being cooked up now. Like it's early days in AI and publishing. So you might need to ask for clarification on those. Okay. So make sure you read those. There are some examples. You can click on this link for our author guidelines and what they look like with the undergraduate research journal. They're fairly typical of what you would see with academic journals. maybe more detailed, in fact. We also have, speaking of deciding whether to use this next step, think about AI if you're going to use it. We have these kind of, I think, somewhat oversimplification, but a good starting point decision trees in the library AI guide. So, if I'm using multimedia content, should I use it? Decision tree about authoring a paper for publication and using AI as a writing tool. We have some other decision trees that you can look at there, but they're kind of a good starting point that you could maybe bring to a meeting with co-authors if you're co-authoring. When you're bringing in AI, you, of course, don't want to cite it as a factual information source. You need to be the verifier of the information. Just because it's AI doesn't mean it's right. And it can't be an author because it's not human. You need to verify as a human being that what it's saying is accurate and true, which is a little more difficult when you're a student. So I'd be very careful with AI relying on that because you don't necessarily understand the nuances or have the background to understand whether what you're reading is true or right or missing something. If you're using responses in your work as a primary source, you have to cite it. There's ways in different style guides. They explain how to do that. The Writing Center can help with that. If you're using it to formulate research inquiries, you might be required to cite it. And so keep documentation of all of that. Make sure that you've, kept a track of how you've interacted with it. There might be institutional guidelines around that. And then there's also discussing your plans to use Gen AI with stakeholders, so co-authors, collaborators, group members, publishers, supervisors, just laying it out so you're protected from the beginning and you have a plan. It's a lot of work on the front end, but it's going to be worth it later on. There's risk in using it. So there's data risk, there's data usage concerns. So think about how companies might use the data, data sensitivity. So the risks increase with sensitive information that's put in that could be used as an output with further interactions with other users. And then copyright is a huge area that's untested. The copyright coordinator, Kate Langrell, said she recommends strongly, and a lot of copyright experts do, strongly against using it to generate images or anything like that because there's a lot of stuff still in court with people's work being stolen by AI companies that they're regenerating, but they're using other people's work. And so there are some I'm not up on it, all kinds of things are happening every day, but you might end up having to, retract something. It's not something that you want to get into with images, especially. And then if you're doing anything involving Indigenous knowledges, there are copyright considerations. So, meet with a librarian for your search strategy. That's not my area. Search strategy is really important to make sure you're not missing anything, that you're digging around in the right areas. You want to set up a documentation system. So we often think about make sure I cite my sources. That's documentation. Documentation is also keeping good notes, keeping logs, tracking things. You might have advice from people in your lab about how to track information. Like, what are their systems? What do they use? Different researchers use different approaches. Sometimes there are standard approaches. So these are the types of things that you might want to use. I'm going to send you a reading log, which is a really helpful table for reading with a purpose. So when you read a scholarly article, you're like, whoa, and you can get lost in swimming in the detail. How to read to answer a question is something that's going to really shorten your reading time and help you to a lot of times, when I've published, I haven't read the whole article. I'm looking for specific information. I'll look at important sections that I should to verify the strength of the article. But oftentimes researchers are using bits of information from articles, but they're not sitting down and pondering the whole article. It's different in humanities where that is much more focused on. I would take a citation management software workshop. If there are none coming up, the library has recordings. Do any of you use Zotero or Mendeley citation management software? Yeah, there's a bit of a learning curve, but it's in the long run, it's worth it. It's worth it. Okay. Again, some more there. You can look at that if you want later. So reading, kind of a little website here from North Carolina University. We've got we've got something you can click, like if you can click on the different sections, it tells you how to read a journal article and what each section is for. I call it looking under the hood too. So when you're reading, it's going to help your writing in terms of you're not just reading for, I need some information. So it's kind of like if you have a car, it's like if you don't care about cars, you're just like, I just want it to get me from A to B. I don't care what kind of car. That's how you can read. Or you can read with the idea that how does the car work? Look under the hood. This is an amazing car. It works really well. This car breaks down halfway through. So why? And that's that. Don't like respect English majors. This is what they're trained to do really well, is to look under the hood of text and see how things work. So understand, like, here are the moves that they're making. There's a really great website. Is this only sharing the app?
No,
Okay. Do you mind if I go into this browser? Okay. Oh, I don't know what that is. Maybe use this one. So there's a really great website. Has anybody heard of the Manchester Phrase Bank? Okay, you're going to want to bookmark this one. I mean, AI can do some of this, but let's just try to minimize that, okay? Okay, so the Academic Phrase Bank, it looks really dull, but basically it's kind of organized according to that IMRAD. So introduction, lit review, methods, results, discussion, and conclusions, and then different moves you can make within those sections. So if you're introducing your work, like say you're writing up the beginning of your paper, it tells you what happens there. But then if you scroll down, it's got language you can use. So you don't necessarily, you might not end up using these. Sometimes you can just look at this, even when you're not trying to, like, say you're writing along and it's the next sentence and you want to make a particular move, you can use it that way. Or you can say, I'm about to write an introduction. What are the moves? And understand it through the language that's used. And then you can look at that for that language in other researchers' work. So when you read there are bad writing out there in scholarly writing. Read really reputable journals like Nature, for example, if you're in the sciences. Look at the writing. They're a really good editorial team. You can see how they craft things, little things too, like not just phraseology, but typical phrases that are used in scientific and writing, but also like rhythm. So short sentence, long, medium, short, long, and sort of like a randomness to it that creates a naturalness, like a flow. So you're not just reading long sentence after another, short, choppy, that it's got kind of like a natural quality. There's a technical, it's not like an art, it's a science. You can make your writing flow by using different sentence types in length or grammatical structure. So that's something to look for too. But this gives you phrases, so it can help you get you unstuck. Like, what is it I'm trying to say? You can look at this guide and get a sense of that. So say you want to be cautious, cautious interpretation of results, for example. Loads of information here. You can buy, I think it's like $10. You can buy the full guide, but this one is pretty fulsome. So I think that'll be fine. Where's my presentation?
it's one of the tabs.
Here it is. Yeah. Okay. Back to it. All right. So yeah, and read bad work and think about why it's bad. Read widely. So I've got a collection of quotations from Nobel laureates in the sciences and economics, and talking about how reading widely helped them to be a good writer and a good scientist, because they could see what's bad, what's good, how to communicate to different audiences as well. So that's like become a reader in a different way than just looking for information. I'm a big fan too of annotating while you work. It helps you read more actively. All right, so the invention process. If you're really like overwhelmed and you're kind of circling in and you don't know how this is going to look or where you're going to go and you've got too many ideas, invention can kind of like make that a little bit worse, or it can help you to figure out, okay, what structure am I going to use? Like, what are the basics? What's the topic? Why is it important? All of those basics. And then level 2, I've got a template. I'm going to fill in these specific areas in the typical IMRAD fashion. But then also as you go along in the editing phases, like, who am I writing to? Why would they be interested in this? What might they know already? What do they need to know? It's now a wider audience than just the people that you're talking with in your group. Then there's different moves you can make. Like, some papers are Summaries like lit reviews with analysis. I spelled analysis wrong. Narrative, they tell a story. Some are evaluative, they're making an assessment. Some are comparative. We've probably written those as undergrads in classes. Some are more analytical or theoretical. So there are just different kind of moves you can make. And if you're wanting some help with that, you can just contact me and I can give you maybe find some examples for you. Okay. Think about how you situate your work for a wider audience. I'd say the number one thing that we notice as editors at USurge is the work was written for the prof, but they haven't thought about rewriting it for a wider audience. So that doesn't mean like writing a pamphlet at the grade 12 reading level necessarily, but it does mean explaining your terms for a little while. Like before you jump right in, there's a bit of breathing room that needs to happen in terms of setting the stage and explaining things for a wider audience. So how would you discuss this? What is the topic? What theories are you going to use? What are the key debates? We want to clarify the problem or establish your territory. There's a model called the CARS model. Have you heard about that before? Establishing your research territory. So Swales and Feek, that's the names of the authors of this book. They write about research writing, and they have like a whole system for, if you just Google CARS writing or CARS method, a lot of different websites will, and I'll put that in the toolkit as well. It's like a process for how to establish and explain where you fit in the larger discourse. Like, what is it that you're going to do? And when you read, look for this move. So you'll read a journal article and it'll be like paragraph after paragraph. And you're kind of like, why am I reading this? There's kind of a sweet spot that you get to in a journal article. That's, here's why I'm special. So it'll be like, this is what they did. This is what they did. This is what they did. This is the situation. This is the problem. What has not yet been studied yet, like look for that kind of language. And sometimes it's 3, 4 paragraphs and it can have, we tend to do that as students in our shorter papers earlier, like maybe at the end of the first paragraph, like in your typical paper. But this will come a little deeper in. And if you scan for that, it's usually at the beginning of a paragraph. You can kind of see how researchers make that move in their writing. So you sort of look for that. Okay, here's what hasn't been done yet, and then here's what I'm going to do. All right. So you want to state the contribution, I think a little earlier than that if you're writing for a wider audience. Like some journals are really technical and it's harder to dig around. Like they're for a much more expert reader. I would recommend, I think it's better writing to establish it a little bit earlier. So I've got an example. Yeah, this is a link to the CARS model, but I'll put it in the guide. So here's an example. This is our second most cited paper in the undergraduate research journal. It's it's about voluntourism, so where people pay to go away and volunteer, and how that can be problematic. So the beginning of this paper, Sasha makes the stakes really legible to the general political studies reader. So it's still within the discipline, but it's more of a general political scientist, not the person who specifically studies voluntourism. It signals why the paper exists. It models academic tone, but it's still plain language. If you want to Google plain language guide, it's just like taking really technical terminology and explaining it in simpler, more direct, less wordy ways. And she defines terms. So for example, at the beginning here highlighted in yellow, this is done the reason I picked this one is because it's done so quickly. Like most journal articles, you won't see this bang, 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 bang. And this is fine to do in any journal article. It might be more like work that you might put in an abstract in some cases. It depends on like the scope of the paper, right? So this one, it happens really quickly, but that's why it makes a good example for me just showing you right away what's going on. So voluntourism definition explains the term for a wider audience. And then in the next sentence, she talks about why the topic matters. It is becoming popular and is hailed by some as beneficial for both tourists and host communities. So this is what people are saying about it. She's got citations there too. So remember, citations are really important early in the paper to establish like I am standing on the shoulders of giants. Like other people have talked about this, or here's some data, or here's some public, some government statistics, or whatever it is you need to establish your credibility, and to enter the conversation. Like the conversation is your voice, and then the other articles are researchers' voices. And then introducing a clear debate. So this is kind of where she's showing the need for the article, the purpose. So debate has arisen in recent years over the validity of these assessments and over the efficacy and ethics of using volunteerism as a development tool. So the debate, she's got citations for that debate. And then naming the problem. So why am I like, what's the problem? Sort of a problem statement. This is not the only way to write an article, by the way. This is sort of like the moves that you can make to establish territory, and to write to a wider audience. So one of the biggest points of contention in this larger problematizing of the topic is the charge that volunteerism is simply a form of neocolonialism because it does little more than reinforce unequal power relationships and cultural stereotypes between tourists and hosts. So she starts to get more into the detail. And you probably remember from high school, like start general, go specific. It's a bit formulaic, but it's kind of running along those lines. And then after that, so this is the same article introduction. Moving along, the author's contribution is made explicit. So this is where at the end of the second paragraph, she's saying, this is what I'm doing that hasn't been done, or this is why I'm special, or this is why this paper matters. Yeah, so what's being looked at? This paper has two objectives, and they're named really clearly, 1 and 2. And so then the author is prepared to read, and then it's really nice to read, isn't it? Like, I feel like, yeah, okay, I know a bit. Now I'm interested. I understand the larger significance. Now I want to know what this person's going to do. And then it's very satisfying to see them do it, right? It's easy to read. And you're not going to see that in every published article, but that doesn't mean you should write like that. Like there's some bad writing out there. This is just happening in a very compressed way. It's a short paper. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Okay, so behind the scenes, this is something I'm covering in my next workshop, but I'm kind of wrapping up here. But from just, these are things I'm saying you should do. But thinking about the end goal, which is to submit to a journal from an editor's perspective, when the paper comes in, there are conversations being happening around the table about your paper. There are people with highlighters. There are people going through, seeing if you're doing specific things. So it can be a real like intimidating process. But just know that this is to make your work better. And these are some of the things that can frustrate those people when they're looking at your paper. Work that is not clearly situated, terms that aren't defined. That's another one there. The work is not translated for a wider audience, particularly with a multidisciplinary journal. Publication agreement has not been uploaded or followed. You wonder, given the topic or given the work they did, whether they actually read the publication agreement. You need to verify sometimes, did you have ethics approval? That kind of thing. Submitting to the wrong journal look at the journal scope, decide whether or not it's the correct journal to submit to, or there's missing information. They didn't give you the keywords. They didn't say what citation style. They didn't format it properly. They didn't anonymize the manuscript. So now the editors have to go on the back end of the document and anonymize it so the reviewer doesn't see who wrote it, right? So all of that kind of picky work, it can be like carve out a work session to make sure you've got all of that. Like have 2 or 3 hours, go to the writing center. We can send a journal editor. I can work with you, one of the tutors, to sit down and help you to make sure you've attended to these things. And it's really the boring stuff. Like this is a pain, but it'll set you up it'll give you a lot more goodwill. So when the editors get it, they're like, they're going to be happy when they start to read your work and not annoyed. Plus, when you don't do these things, you really slow things down and it can take forever to get published. So the main thing that, they look at journals a lot in terms of time to publication. So you submit and then how long does it take to get published? Some predatory journals, it's like the next day, like that's not good. But there should be not like a year or, more. Sometimes we've had that happen because the author is not getting back to us. So think of an email that's not like Jerry Pokemon 13 that you got when you were at Gmail, when you were, just guessing at some of based on my own kids. Yeah, they're still using those. And it's like, you have to stop using those when you're applying for jobs. So, Yeah. So make sure that you pick something that um, I've started using Proton, and I really like that. It's really secure. And I don't know. I feel like Gmail, like some of those more common accounts, like maybe my Signal, like you're doing this from your basement and it's just a hobby. I don't know. I just like there may be other more serious email providers, maybe. I don't know. Just maybe just pay to keep your USask. It's just a conundrum I'm really wrestling with, and I don't know how to answer the question. But check that you're checking your email or using an email that once you graduate, people, the editors can reach you. Yeah.
Self-hosting be an option? Like if you had your own domain that you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Or you could use ORCID ID. So talk to a librarian about setting up, I know it's redundant, but setting up an ORCID so that you have like a credible place where you put your research and that it's verified. And that's actually would be a good. There are workarounds. I'm just choosing to be really grumpy about it. Okay. Okay, so that's it. I'll take questions, but first I want to put in a plug. These are due on May 10th, and they're open to any undergraduate student. So people talking about the supervising faculty is Jacob El Hassan in College of Medicine. You don't have to be in that field. This can be like a personal project. So if you want to like get something published like right away, these are going to be peer reviewed. And they're short. They're just like a post, like a reflection or a poem or something about your hair, plus a photograph of like your hair, but without your face. So basically, like it might be like, say this person will talk about like my grandmother taught me how to braid, just like some of the cultural stuff around it, or like I grew up with red hair, getting bullied or something like that. So it can be anything you want. You don't have to like share your trauma. It might be like a happy story or whatever. But it's a pretty easy project to kind of put forward, and it's an open peer review process. So you'll have a lot of like, you'll learn about how to do autoethnographic work, which is a serious form of research. It's not, so you can put something in, right? You might want to research autoethnography, but we're not going to turn a lot of people away for this because we want them to go through this process, and it's going to be a special issue. There'll be print copies. Yeah. So yeah, my husband said, "Can I put my male pattern baldness in there?" And I'm like, "You're not an undergraduate student," but no, so you can. Anyway, there's lots of different hair, like so much interesting stuff around here. So anyway, there's that coming up, and then applications for editorial board if you're interested. The deadline is May 11th now. If you don't have a lot of time to go through the process of applying because you need to collect references and transcripts and that kind of thing, it's a pretty competitive process. Like a lot of people apply and not a lot of people get hired. Okay, so when you get the slides, there's more information about USurge at the end, but the editors are actually giving a session next week or something.
This week, I think, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that journal, you can, or you can go through some of the slides that will be repeated. Just tack them on to the end, park them at the end of this slideshow that you can go through those if you want. So yeah, it's a lot. I mean, this is overwhelming, maybe a lot of information. I'm thinking back to myself as an undergrad that I might have probably thinking myself back then, I would have just thrown in the towel. I think I would have want to go backpacking instead. So yeah, I really commend you for being interested in this and being so attentive and wanting to try this out. Just remember, like, if you're swimming in the detail and overwhelm and you're already juggling work and all kinds of other things, there's just help for every little bit of it. Yeah, there's help for every bit of it. So feel free to, if you need a point person, feel free to reach out to me. I can triage you or I can help you. And yeah, I think you can do it, right? Okay.